Hi, I'm Martin Kelly, Senior Editor of Friends Journal, and with me today is September author Don McCormick. Welcome, Don.
Welcome. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're all welcomed. Our author chats, sure. You are the author of Relationships in the Quaker Community in the September issue, and I can read your bio here. Donald W. McCormick is a member of Grass Valley Meeting in Nevada City, California, and a retired professor. His interests include mindfulness and Quakerism, Quaker spiritual autobiography, and Quakerism and mystical experience. He also trains mindfulness teachers for United Mindfulness, which he co-founded. And you've had a number of articles with us on these topics. Um, Tell me why you wanted to write this new one on Quaker communities.
Well, I'm often inspired by your list of upcoming special issues. And I saw the one on relationships, and I thought, in the Quaker community, I thought, are my relationships in the Quaker community different from the ones I have from my neighbors or my friends or my at work or at school? And I realized they were. So I began talking with people about it, doing adult ed sessions to get more input, and I just got fascinated by the idea.
And how have they been different? What are some experiences you've had with Quakers that you wouldn't have experienced elsewhere?
Um, well, they're different. I think one of the things that most struck me is how willing people were to help each other in the Quaker community. And this really struck me when my friend Stan told me about a woman that he had not known very well, but who'd been involved in Santa Monica meeting where we were both members at the time, and who we found out she had cancer and needed help getting to and from chemotherapy treatments. And so he started driving her there and back, um, sitting with her during the treatments. And then after the treatments finished, they both went to her physician. And the physician explained that they weren't working and that she was going to pass. And he went home and cried. And then he started organizing the meeting to help take care of her.
Amazing.
Um,
Yeah.
so they would help buy food. They'd come over and help her dress and eat. And Stan also would come over and he'd bring his little electric keyboard and play through all the songs in the Quaker hymnal, which is like over 500 songs, I think. And they'd sing together. And eventually, because she couldn't sing, and they'd sing to her. And I thought about the way that I had seen Quakers um, help each other and organize to help each other in meeting. And then, well, early in my life, I went through a period of massive spiritual promiscuity where I was involved in a bunch of different religious groups, a lot of which focused on meditation, but also some Christian ones too, and some more than a year. And I just didn't see that. Um, I didn't see that. I never wound up making friends in those groups, and I didn't see ways they would set it up so that would happen. And I didn't see them when, like, a member of the group was in distress, people organizing to help them. And I went, wow, the Quaker relationships that I'm seeing are really different in that way. Um, I also noticed that I felt a real joy when I was helping, especially with the group work parties.
Mhm.
Um, so, for example, there was one fellow who he'd been involved in the meeting for years, helped with a lot of tech stuff, but then he hadn't shown up for the last few years, and I hadn't actually met him. But he had health problems, and he he basically lost control of his bowels and he couldn't stay in the apartment he was living. So the meeting got together and helped clean up his place and helped move his stuff to the storage unit and helped him move to an assisted living facility. And God, there's just, you could practically, well, you could feel the spirit
Yeah,
there.
that's amazing.
Um, yeah. And then it got worse. And then he had to leave the assisted living facility. And we had another group work party and went there. And it was on a Saturday. And people couldn't stay the whole time. And eventually, at the end of the day, after helping to clean up his place and move stuff to the storage unit, I was the only person there. And it was late, and I was sitting there with a rented rug shampooer and helping clean the feces off of the carpet. And I realized I never met this guy, and I'm really happy cleaning up. And it was like, what is this about? And then I
Right.
realized I had some kind of connection to Quakers, even ones I'd never met before. I, I saw that with my friends Amy and Shamba, who they lived near Sierra Friends Center, which is the place that, is now being transferred to Nisenan, the local indigenous tribe. And there was a fire that went right through the middle and it burned down their house, which they built by hand. It was this beautiful yurt. And they raised they had a um, GoFundMe campaign that someone organized for them, and people from all over the world, Quakers from Sweden, from Australia, all these people they never met before,
Right.
donated so much money so quickly that they when they realized they had enough to meet their needs, they began to give it to other people whose houses, other Quakers whose houses had burned down in the fire. And I went, wow, this is really quite a connection here. And those people, they didn't know Amy and Shonda.
Yeah. Well, certainly, when friends started trying to come up with a list of what are some of our sort of modern values, community was one of the key ones. And Quakers had always typically tried to live together in community and be sort of a part of each other's lives. So
Mhm.
it's sort of amazing that that sort of ethos continues into the 21st century when, we're all scattered, all about, and all traveling distances to meetings. Why do you think that is? Do you have any pet theories as to why Quakers have been holding on to a community like that?
Oh, well, people are desperate for it now. Um, people are so isolated and alienated. A lot of it, I mean, some of it comes from things simply like TV, where families that used to hang out together and talk more would instead wind up sitting in front of a television. That isolated places to live, like there was senior housing, and then there's singles housing and whatnot. We began to become more alienated from each other in a lot of ways. And in fact, where I live now in Grass Valley, a little town in the Sierra Nevada mountains, um, just just 50 years ago, when our meetings got up, there were a lot of people who decided, let's buy some land together and live right around each other.
Yeah,
And
that's
there
great.
was at least three intentional communities like that back then.
Yeah, well, and even, all of our lives are so immediate. I think about how, back in the day, you went to visit a friend, you went to their house, you banged on their door, and, now you have to call first, make sure they're home. And before you even call, you have to text them because, just calling someone out of the blue is almost a faux pas for some folks today. So you have to text them, then you call them, and by the time you've arranged and you're just checking your calendars, well, this Tuesday, this Thursday. Life is a lot more complicated, mediated, rather than just sort of showing up and seeing if they're there, seeing if a light is on.
You know, I have a question for you
Okay.
because I realized you are in a very interesting and unique position where you've clearly been to way more Quaker meetings than I have, but also you get people's ideas and perspectives from, you probably are exposed to more different ones than anybody. So I'm curious about whether your experience about relationships in Quaker community matches or doesn't match mine, or ways it does and ways it doesn't. So how does your experience align with what I've been saying?
I think it depends a lot on the different types of meetings.
Hmm.
For a while I was part of a downtown meeting, and sometimes a newcomer they don't quite notice because they're not going to stay around as long. So it's not quite as friendly. It's cordial, but not quite as solidly everyone's looking after each other. There are meetings where there's a lot of people who sort of know each other and have just a natural spirit of friendliness and wanting to get to know each other, and hanging out after a meeting and snacking and having coffee, and they just want to spend all the early afternoon together. So it's really it's kind of depends on what kind of meeting and whether people are booked up and have to run off or run off to a committee meeting or talk to someone for the committee meeting or whether they can just linger. There's
Mhm.
quite a range, I think, of experiences that I've had. Sometimes just going to a meeting and almost no one says hello, and you're like, well, gee, that's kind of not great, and others where everyone's just so super friendly. So it's a wide range, but I do sometimes think that that's the determinant factor on whether the meeting is healthy and maybe growing or not healthy and just falling apart and slowly
Mhm.
decaying that way. Food I found helps. Having just food after a meeting and everyone just like having it's just a wonderful. That's sort of my trick for outreach is just have food and invite people to linger. Is just so powerful.
It's also very handy in first day school,
Ah,
the quality of snacks. But the thing you said about the city, that actually, I've only been a member of two meetings. One is in the country in a small town, and the other was in Los Angeles area. And that kind of jives with my experience about the difference between the two meetings.
and size probably also matters. So my current meeting, it's about 15 people. We're all there. We see each other. We talk to each other. If you have a meeting that's, larger, at least by Quaker standards, 80 or 100 people, people are going to break out into different groups and maybe not see each other as much. And there's advantages to that and disadvantages.
Well, I really notice the advantages to that. I mean, um, when you think about the small group movement in Christianity, I think it's probably one of the two biggest changes in the last 50, 70 years. And God, I mean, there are places where people can come in immediately, they can start to make those connections, and you get to be close with those people. And, when you're at the hospital, the member of your small groups. Those are the people who show up and offer to take care of your kids. And when you're back, they bring the meals and stuff. And I think that kind of format can be amazing. It can also go along with big churches. The biggest church in the world is all small groups.
Mhm.
It's in, I
Yeah.
think, South Korea. But and I tried to get some kind of small group program going in Santa Monica, but never never did enough follow through to make it going. But yeah, I think size, I would agree with that.
Yeah, well, we've both talked about, outreach and techniques we can uh, use to get more people in and get them connected. And evangelical non-denominational churches, some of them are just, they're brilliant. And, someone comes in and they sort of assign you to a small group. There's a group of people you get to know. There's maybe parents groups, there's affinity groups of some things. They'll have a little playground in the back for all the kids to have. There'll be a softball team. So there'll be ways of people getting to know a smaller group. So even like in a larger church, there's people all getting to know each other. And there are some Quaker models about that. I know for a while, Friendly Eights was a model that people were using where families would come together, a group of eight would come together to have meals together
We
outside.
do that, yeah,
Yeah,
still.
and that's great. I know there's just times where we mix up our community, which it can be helpful. Christmas dinners, for instance, like in a big meeting, sometimes just the Christmas meal, and we all just sort of end up sitting in different like tables than we are used to, and we talk to
Mhm.
people who we wouldn't talk to any other time of the year. So just finding ways of mixing like that for a larger group can be really helpful for to get to know people.
Well, I've been very fascinated by the work of this Stanford anthropologist named Tanya Luhrmann. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her or not, but she studied an evangelical group that was kind of evolved from the Jesus people, and the small groups were interesting in terms of how they helped people learn how to basically talk to God and communicate with the Spirit. She would talk about how in the church that she was in, people would show up the first time and newcomers would say something like, well, I don't know how to talk to God or listen to God. Could you talk to God for me? And
Oh,
they would say, we're putting you in a class and you're going to learn how to do this. And she said that same person 6 months later would go, oh, of course I know how. I mean, I recognize the voice of God just as I would recognize the voice of my mom on the phone. And I thought, wow, that's fascinating, you know? I'd love to learn more about what they're doing in that. See if we can adapt some of that, without buying everything whole hog.
yeah, no, it'd be great. I mean, just have a kind of continual Quakerism 101 too, so new people coming in get up to speed and sort of understand what we're talking about. Sometimes you come into a meeting. So I would often, in various points, just walk into a meeting and just pretend like I had never been there before and I didn't know what Quakers were. Just some strange meeting to me. And I would walk in and, there'd be a few like isolated ministries that maybe about some political situation, maybe about how the trees just look real pretty today. And um, then everyone just sort of shakes hands and goes away. And I realized, like, what would I have learned from the Quaker way at that point?
It's interesting you were talking about a continuous Quakerism 101 course because I just came back from the Lake Erie yearly meeting spiritual formation group. They asked me to do a workshop on mystical experience and Quakerism. And one of the things they do that, and they did it in a really interesting way that has addressed a problem that both in Santa Monica meeting and Grass Valley meeting, we always found, which is no, there were never enough people who showed up to have a class. And so what they did is they have a continuous online class. And if one meeting took that on, that'd be a lot of work. But what they did is they basically said, does your meeting want to take one of the sessions? And so the work gets divided. It's continuous. So when somebody new comes in, there's not a long waiting time before they can start doing that. It's online, although it also could be hybrid. You could participate in the online thing while at another member's home or something like that. And I just thought, wow, that's exciting. So I'm interested in seeing if I can get something like that going out west.
And
Or-
that's arranged by the yearly meeting does that?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We should definitely be doing that because new people walking in my meeting and they'll be asking questions and we'll think, well, we need to figure out a class for that, and 6 months later we'll have ourselves organized for that. But it'd be nice to have something quick and immediate to direct them to.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that orientation is really important. My first experience of Quaker meeting was when I was in high school, and I rode my bike to well, I won't mention the meeting, but I went to a meeting where they had a nice building, and I sat down, and there were about three elderly people there, and they didn't explain anything. And I was in 11th grade. And after 10 minutes, I thought, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to be focusing my attention somewhere? Maybe they did ministry three times. I couldn't wait to get out of there, because I didn't know what was going on. And for a guy in high school, sitting and doing nothing was pretty unpleasant. It wasn't until 15 years later that I went to another Quaker meeting. And they could have done something as simple as, and I know some meetings do this, having a card on the seats that says, here's what we do and here's what worship is about. Or I think San Francisco does a little orientation session before their worship, so newcomers can do that. But that explaining what's going on right away so that people don't have an experience like I did when I was a teenager, um, I that experience really made it emphasize the importance of that to me.
I don't know if I've shared on any of the author chats. My first experience, I wanted to visit a Quaker meeting, and my mom also wanted. I was in college, so we decided to go. We knew kind of where it was, and we parked, and we saw lots of people, well-dressed people, walking into a building. So we followed them, and they were shaking our hands. They were greeting us. They were so happy to see us, and there were people like then starting off in song, and they were singing hymns. And after about 10 minutes of this, my mom and I looked to each other, and it's like, this doesn't seem like a Quaker meeting we've heard of. So we kind of quietly get up and try as as unobtrusively as we can to walk out the door. And we realized that the local evangelical church had burned down or something. And so the meeting was renting out this place to them while they rebuild. Friends meeting was across the driveway. We went over there, and as I like to say, no one greeted us, no one said hello, and it felt like home. It's like, oh yes,
Yeah,
where we went.
that's a Quaker meeting. It sounds like you walked into the wrong scene in the movie Friendly Persuasion.
Right, yes,
They
indeed.
compare the regular church with the Quaker meeting.
Church. But I will say, my wife tells the story for the first time she walked into a Quaker meeting, and it was a small meeting, and they were like happy to see her. And one of the people like brought her over to the library after and said, "Oh, you should read this book and this book and this book," and gave it to her, which of course means she has to come back at some point to return the books, which is always a good
Mm.
technique as well. Um, and just having that friendly person coming in and sort of getting you oriented, either formally, like you say, happens in San Francisco meeting, or just informally, just showering the person with attention, I think is can't be beat.
I want to find out what the books were. I've been on a decades long pursuit of what's the perfect book to give to a newcomer. And some of them, I remember one that was aimed at newcomers, and clearly, they referred to the English Reformation and they focused on history and they used a lot of terms that I've been a Quaker for a long time. I didn't even understand some of the terms. And I thought, this is not oriented to a new person. Or at any rate, I've yet to find the perfect one, and I'm not going to write it myself, which would probably only appeal to me.
Right. Well, it's hard. It's hard to talk about Quakers without talking about history. And for, at least 150 years, we've defined ourselves by our history. If you look at the historiography of Quakers, kind of the way we do things is by looking at history, and it's kind of a tendency we need to unlearn.
I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I remember one of the lessons they gave us from Quaker Quest was they said, don't focus on the history with newcomers. The newcomers are interested in much, in different things for the most part. Yeah, of course it's important. Uh, I think for something for newcomers, it's not like some books which the first half of the book is about history.
Yeah.
Should be less emphasized.
I do like to describe Quakerism, try to describe it without talking about George Fox, without talking about 17th century. Like it's a challenge to do, but I think it's an important one.
On the
Um,
other hand, when we get a new member who's gone through, becomes a member, we have a tradition of giving them a book. And my favorite book to give is the historical novel, The Peaceful Kingdom, which I think in some ways, I've learned more from that about Quakerism, that book, than I have from so many other nonfiction books that address things directly. There's just something about being able to fill in the cracks and also the amazing storytelling of Yonda Hartog that has helped me in so many ways.
well, it's good to have all the outreach we can have. Um,
Yes.
and it's good that friends have been good at community in your experience and in mine and many people's experience. And hopefully we can be even better about that and help just welcome new people in and get them up to speed and be good uh, relationships, build good relationships with them. So thank you,
Yes.
John, for coming with me today and talking more about your article. Again, relationships in the Quaker community in the September issue of Friends Journal. Thanks,
Uh,
Don.
I was delighted. It was a lot of fun.